Old man, leave now!
I only came to bless the bride.
That face. It can't be.
The wedding of Ada and Emeka was the talk of Abuja. Guests arrived in expensive cars, photographers rushed from one smiling face to another, and the sound of talking drums mixed with laughter filled the air. White flowers covered every corner of the magnificent venue, while friends and family celebrated what everyone called the wedding of the year. Chief Adewale, the bride's father, stood proudly at the entrance, welcoming governors, business partners, traditional rulers, and respected members of society. Everything was perfect. Nothing was allowed to spoil the day. Then, an old man slowly appeared at the gate. His faded brown kaftan was covered in dust. His worn sandals looked as if they had walked hundreds of kilometers. Leaning on an old wooden walking stick, he carried a small cloth bag over his shoulder. Some guests looked away in disgust, while others whispered to one another. The security guards immediately blocked his path. The old man wasn't asking for money. He wasn't begging for food. With a calm voice, he simply said he wanted to bless the bride before the ceremony began. The guards laughed. Some guests joined them. One of the guards grabbed his arm and ordered him to leave. The old man did not struggle. Instead, he quietly lifted his eyes towards the wedding hall, as if he had been searching for someone for many years. At that exact moment, Chief Adewale turned towards the entrance after hearing the commotion. His eyes met the old man's face. Everything around him suddenly disappeared. The music, the laughter, the cheering. It was as though time had stopped. His hands began to shake. The smile disappeared from his face. For several long seconds he could not breathe. Then, before hundreds of confused guests, the powerful billionaire slowly removed his cap, walked towards the old beggar, and fell to his knees. Nobody understood why. The only words that came out of Chief Adewale's mouth were almost a whisper. "Forgive me. I searched for you everywhere." The entire wedding venue fell completely silent. Before we continue, if this story is already touching your heart, please take a second to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our next inspiring Nollywood story. And tell us in the comments, where are you watching from? We'd love to know which part of the world you're joining us from. Now, let's find out why one of Nigeria's richest men fell to his knees before a poor old beggar. The silence hanging over the wedding venue became heavier with every passing second. No one dared to move. The same guests who had laughed at the old man moments ago now stared in complete confusion. Some quietly reached for their phones, recording the unbelievable scene unfolding before them. Chief Adewale remained on his knees. Tears rolled freely down his cheeks. The proud businessman whom everyone admired had never bowed to anyone in public before. Yet here he was, trembling before a man dressed like a homeless wanderer. Pa Elijah gently touched the chief's shoulder. "Stand up, my son," he said softly. Chief Adewale slowly rose to his feet, unable to take his eyes off the old man. His wife, Mrs. Adewale, hurried over. "Adewale, what's happening? Who is this man?" she asked, her voice filled with worry. The chief swallowed hard. For years, he had buried the truth so deeply that even his own family knew nothing about it. He looked around at the hundreds of curious faces, then at his daughter, Ada, standing in her wedding gown, confused and frightened. Taking a deep breath, he spoke. "Before this wedding continues, everyone deserves to know why I'm alive today." A murmur spread across the crowd. 28 years earlier, before wealth, before fame, before the expensive houses and luxury cars. Adewale had been an ordinary young trader, struggling to survive. One rainy evening, while traveling home with money he had borrowed to start his first business, armed robbers attacked the bus. People screamed. Some passengers jumped from the moving vehicle. Others were beaten without mercy. Adewale tried to protect the bag containing everything he owned, but one of the robbers struck him hard on the head. He collapsed. The robbers believed he was dead. They threw his unconscious body into a deep roadside bush before disappearing into the night. Hours later, an elderly farmer returning from his cocoa farm heard a faint groan. Instead of walking away, the farmer searched through the darkness until he found the badly injured young man. That farmer was Pa Elijah. The memories came rushing back so clearly that Chief Adewale's voice began to tremble. That night, the rain fell without mercy. The narrow village road had turned into thick mud, making it impossible for any vehicle to pass. There were no hospitals nearby, no mobile phones to call for help, and no neighbors willing to risk traveling in such dangerous weather. But Pa Elijah refused to give up on a stranger. Although he was already exhausted from working all day on his small cocoa farm, he carefully lifted the unconscious young man onto his back. Step after painful step, he walked through the heavy rain. His worn sandals sank into the muddy road. More than once, he slipped and almost fell, but each time he tightened his grip and kept moving. By the time he reached his tiny mud house on the edge of the village, both men were soaked to the bone. His wife, Mama Ruth, gasped when she saw the badly injured stranger. "Elijah, who is this?" "I don't know," he replied quietly. "But if we leave him to die, God will ask us why." For the next 3 days, the couple cared for the unconscious young man as though he were their own son. Mama Ruth cleaned his wounds with warm water and herbs. Pa Elijah sold the only goat the family owned to buy medicine from a nearby town. That goat was supposed to pay their children's school fees. Their neighbors mocked them. "You sold your only goat for someone you don't even know?" one man scoffed. "What if he's a criminal?" another asked. Pa Elijah simply smiled. "If showing mercy is a mistake," he said, "then let it be my mistake." Several days later, the young man finally opened his eyes. Confused and weak, he looked around the small room with its cracked mud walls and simple wooden furniture. He had no idea where he was. Nor did he know that the poor farmer, sitting quietly beside his bed, had just sacrificed almost everything to keep him alive. Little did either of them know that this single act of kindness would one day bring them together again under the most unexpected circumstances. Chief Adewale paused, struggling to hold back his tears. "I survived because of him," he said, pointing at Pa Elijah. "Everything I have today began in that small mud house." The guests listened in complete silence. Even the musicians had stopped playing. After several weeks, the young Adewale recovered enough to return to Lagos. Before leaving, he held Pa Elijah's hands tightly. "I have nothing to repay you now," he said, "but I promise you this. The day I succeed, I will come back for you. Your family will never know poverty again." Pa Elijah smiled. "My son, I didn't save you because I wanted a reward. But I will still come back," Adewale insisted. "I give you my word." With hope in his heart, Adewale left the village. Months turned into years. His small trading business grew beyond his imagination. One shop became three. Three became a company. The company became an empire. Soon, Chief Adewale was one of the most respected businessmen in Nigeria, but success came with endless responsibilities, business meetings, international travel, political connections, awards, investments. The promise he once repeated every day slowly faded into the background of his busy life, not because he wanted to forget, but because life kept pulling him further away. Meanwhile, life became even harder for Pa Elijah. A terrible fire destroyed his cocoa farm. His beloved wife, Mama Ruth, fell seriously ill and passed away after months of suffering. His children left the village in search of work, but none ever returned. Year after year, he waited, not for money, not for riches, only to know whether the young man he had rescued was still alive. Sometimes, while sitting outside his small house at sunset, he would smile to himself. "I pray God has blessed that boy," he would whisper. He never complained that no one came back. He simply thanked God for allowing him to save a life. Then, only a few weeks before Ada's wedding, a newspaper carried a full-page story celebrating one of Nigeria's richest businessmen. The smiling face on the front page looked older, more successful, more confident. But those eyes, Pa Elijah recognized them immediately. It was the same young man he had carried through the rain all those years ago. Quietly, he folded the newspaper, picked up his old walking stick, and began the longest journey of his life, not to ask for money, but simply to see with his own eyes that the life he had saved had truly become a blessing. A deep silence settled over the wedding venue. Many of the guests lowered their heads in shame. Only a few minutes earlier, they had laughed at the old man standing before them. Now, they were learning that without him, there would have been no Chief Adewale, and perhaps no wedding at all. Chief Adewale wiped away his tears. "My greatest regret is not that I became busy," he said softly. "My greatest regret is that I broke the promise I made to the man who gave me a second chance at life." He turned to Pa Elijah. "I searched for your village many years later, but people told me the road had changed and many families had moved away. I kept telling myself I would search again, but tomorrow became next year, and next year became 28 years. Pa Elijah smiled gently. There was no anger in his eyes, no bitterness, only peace. "My son," he said, "I never came here to remind you of your promise." The old man looked at Ada, who was already wiping tears from her face. "I saw your daughter's wedding in the newspaper. I only wanted to bless her before she started her new home." He slowly reached into his small cloth shoulder bag. The guests watched curiously. There was no envelope filled with money, no expensive gift. Pa Elijah carefully brought out a small, worn Bible, its edges faded from years of use. He held it out to Ada. "This Bible belonged to my late wife," he said. "She prayed for every young couple in this village. Before she died, she told me, 'The day you find that young man again, give this Bible to his first daughter on her wedding day.'" Tears streamed down Ada's cheeks as she accepted the precious gift with both hands. At that moment, she realized something many of the wealthy guests had forgotten. The most valuable gifts are not always the most expensive. Sometimes, they carry a lifetime of love, sacrifice, and prayers. The entire venue erupted into quiet sobs. Even the security guards who had pushed Pa Elijah away moments earlier could no longer hold back their tears. One of them stepped forward, bowed respectfully, and whispered, "Papa, please forgive us." Pa Elijah simply nodded with a warm smile. "There is nothing to forgive." No one spoke. The only sounds inside the wedding venue were quiet sobs and the soft rustling of clothes as people wiped tears from their eyes. Chief Adewale looked at the old Bible in Ada's hands. Then he looked at Pa Elijah. For a long moment, he could not find the words. Finally, he stepped forward and held the old man's hands tightly. "They say money can repay every debt," he said with a trembling voice. "Today I know that's not true. There is no amount of wealth that can repay the man who gave me my life." Pa Elijah smiled gently. "You owe me nothing, my son." But Chief Adewale slowly shook his head. "No, I owe you everything." He turned towards the master of ceremonies. "Please stop the wedding for a few minutes." The crowd exchanged puzzled looks. Chief Adewale walked onto the stage and picked up the microphone. "I have spent years building businesses," he announced. "Today I want to build something even greater, a legacy of gratitude." He turned back to Pa Elijah. "From this day forward, you will never sleep in a broken house again." Gasps echoed across the venue. "I have already built homes for strangers through charity, yet I forgot the man who first showed me kindness." He paused, his voice breaking. "That mistake ends today." The guests applauded softly. Chief Adewale continued. "A brand new house will be built for Papa Elijah in his village." The applause grew louder. "Every month, he will receive everything he needs to live comfortably for the rest of his life." More applause. His late wife's name, Mama Ruth, will be used to establish a scholarship for children from poor farming families. Every child who dreams of going to school but cannot afford it will have a chance because of the compassion she and her husband showed a stranger many years ago. By now, the entire venue was on its feet. Many guests were openly crying. Some business leaders nodded in admiration. Others quietly promised themselves they would never ignore an act of kindness again. Pa Elijah stood speechless, his eyes filled with tears, not because of the house or the money, but because the young man he had once rescued had finally become the good man he always prayed he would be. He lifted his trembling hands toward the sky. "Thank you, Lord," he whispered. "I didn't save a rich man that day. I saved a grateful heart." The crowd erupted into a standing ovation that seemed to shake the entire hall. The wedding resumed, but no one remembered it because of the expensive decorations. No one talked about the luxury cars. No one discussed the famous guests. Long after the music ended and the lights were switched off, people only spoke about one thing: the old man in the faded brown kaftan. Before the couple exchanged their final vows, Ada quietly walked over to Pa Elijah. Without caring that her beautiful white wedding gown touched the floor, she knelt before him. The entire hall watched in silence. "Gently," she said, holding his weathered hands. "From today, you are not our guest. You are our grandfather." Pa Elijah's lips trembled. For years, loneliness had been his closest companion. Now, in a single moment, he had gained a family again. Emeka stepped forward with a warm smile. "Papa," he said, "our home will always have a room waiting for you. You will never be alone again." The old man's eyes overflowed with tears. He had traveled all the way to Abuja, expecting nothing more than the chance to whisper a blessing over a bride. Instead, God had restored everything he never thought he would have again. As the pastor called everyone to join hands in prayer, Pa Elijah was invited to stand between the bride and groom. He placed one trembling hand on Ada's head and the other on Emeka's. "My children," he prayed softly, "never measure people by the clothes they wear or the cars they drive. A person's greatest wealth is the kindness hidden inside their heart. May your home always have room for compassion. May you never ignore someone simply because the world has overlooked them. Amen. The congregation answered together. Moments later, joyful music filled the venue once again. But this time, something had changed. The security guards who had pushed Pa Elijah away earlier welcomed every visitor with new respect. Guests who had once looked down on him now greeted him with warm smiles and handshakes. Children gathered around him, listening as he shared simple stories about faith, kindness, and hope. That single afternoon transformed more than one family. It transformed hundreds of hearts. Months later, the Mama Ruth Foundation officially opened its doors. Children from poor farming communities across Nigeria received scholarships in honor of a woman whose greatest act of love had been caring for a wounded stranger. A new house was completed for Pa Elijah in his village, but he often visited Ada and Emeka, who proudly introduced him everywhere they went as their grandfather. Whenever people asked Chief Adewale what the greatest achievement of his life was, they expected him to mention his businesses. Instead, he always smiled and replied, "The greatest blessing of my life wasn't becoming rich. It was being given a second chance by a poor man who chose kindness over comfort." And from that day forward, whenever people in Abuja spoke about the wedding of the year, they never remembered the luxury. They remembered the humble old man whose kindness proved that one selfless act can change generations. Never judge a person by their appearance. The hands that look empty today may have once carried someone else's future. Kindness given without expecting a reward never goes unnoticed. It returns in ways that can change lives and generations.